I'm Anna Sellers, and I'm going to show you how I did a painting I called Her Hand. I started off with the warm and cool of each of my colors. Ivory black and ultramarine blue for my blues, burnt umber and permelva white for my neutrals, alizarin crimson and fankin red for my reds, yellow ochre and lemon yellow for my yellows. I toned my canvas with a thin layer of the burnt umber, and then I took a picture of my hand with my phone. I thought I would be clever and skip a step and not do a detailed drawing to transfer to my canvas, to make it go a little faster. Normally I don't have a problem drawing at the easel, but there's a whole bunch of stuff between me and the canvas. You would think at the second wipeout that I would have thought, I need to draw this out before I put this on this canvas. But no, that's not what happened at all. There are some people who like to call me stubborn. I like to call myself persistent. But for the sake of this video, let's just say I was truly committed to the process. The whole point of an underpainting like this is to establish where your darks and where your lights are. So that's what I was trying to do with this. But the further I got along, the more I realized something is off. So I'm going to let you watch me struggle with this underpainting for a little bit while I describe my inspiration for doing this hand. It isn't uncommon for artists to do hand studies like this, and they're really good for you because you learn a lot from them. But the other day when I was doing a self-portrait, an idea hit my mind that I just couldn't shake. I was just doing a self-portrait of my face, but I noticed that my forehead looked an awful lot like my father's forehead. And normally that wouldn't be such a big deal, except that until 2 years ago, I had no idea who my father was. I was adopted by my maternal grandparents, and somewhere between my mother dying when I was 3 and my grandmother dying when I was 8, my father's name got completely lost, and no one knew who he was. So I spent my entire life only having half of my family to compare myself to whenever I looked in the mirror. To make matters worse, when I was 11, I went into foster homes, so the half of my family that I did compare myself to were no longer a part of my life. When I first started talking about turning in my DNA test and doing the research to find my father, there were a few people who thought it was a really dumb idea. I mean, I'm a grown woman, so it isn't like I would be able to have that father and daughter relationship. And I had a family, and I had a whole bunch of things already established. What in the world could I be missing? But there's that half of you that you don't understand, that you don't know about. And I think that's what I was looking for, but I just didn't know it yet. I mean, 3 years ago, I would have looked at this and thought, wow, all those bumps and veins, I'm getting my grandma's hands. And I still think that today, but now I have to ask myself, which grandma's hands do I have? Oh yeah, about the painting, I mixed up some paints so that I could start getting some color put onto this. I don't know if this is actually a decent drawing that I have under here, or if I just gave up trying to draw like that. But anyway, here we go. So the first thing I did was push my darks and throw some lights, and I played back and forth, light and dark. And I also played around with the idea of warms and cools, because the left side of this painting is supposed to be cool and the right side is supposed to be warm. And this is where I start to panic a little, because anytime that you add something as opaque as white to your paint, you start to lose the drawing underneath. And it's not that I had a really great drawing underneath, but when it's lost, it's scary. And I'm going to be perfectly honest with you and just tell you that at this point, I'm just putting colors down to see what they look like next to each other. because I know ultimately what I'm going after. I'm just not sure how to get there. But that's kind of how life works, right? I mean, you kind of know where you're trying to go, but you have no idea what you've got to do to get where you got to go. So the only thing you can do is just take a stab at it. Put something down, try something new, take a step forward. Throw your DNA up on a family tree site. The very worst case scenario is that you would have to start all over again. And even if you did start all over again, now you have some knowledge. So you're not starting from scratch. You're starting with something that you know. I bet I can guess what you're thinking. You're thinking, oh, geez, Anna, this painting is really ugly. And you know what? You're right. It is really ugly. But just hang on there. It'll get better, I promise. So I thought I had some things all figured out about the DNA, not the painting. I still have no idea what I'm doing in this painting. So I figured out that I needed to be prepared for my father to say, I don't want anything to do with you and I never want to hear from you again. And I was fully prepared for that when I turned in my DNA. So while I was doing my research and narrowing down who my grandparents were and all of that, I was really ready for anything bad to happen. But that isn't how it worked out. In fact, he threw me for a loop and was actually kind of happy I found him. And just like this painting, I had no idea what I was doing. I had no idea how I was going to move forward, but I was fully committed to the process. So while he was wrapping his mind around the idea that he had an extra daughter he didn't know about, I started stalking my sisters. So I started filling in the background and figuring out how things are related to one another. In the painting, not in my story. And even though I didn't originally plan to have a really dark background, I like the way the hand is brought into the light, and I like the way the light starts to make sense on the hand. So this turned out to be something that was just a trial and error, and it actually came out good. Now that I have a background and a foreground figured out, I can start wiggling in some of those details and refining some of these edges and making some of the things smooth that need to be smooth and some of the things sharper that need to be sharper. So by now you're probably thinking, oh wow, Anna, that is starting to look a lot better. I think you're getting there. But I did warn you that I didn't know what I was doing, right? I got to this point and realized I really have to move that finger. So that leads me back to my sisters. Once my sisters found out about me, my phone started going off the hook. And of course, they wanted to get to know about me. I wanted to ask them questions and know more about them. And that's when I started hearing all kinds of stories about my other grandma. I've always been the kind of girl who is just a little, we'll call it rough around the edges. If you really want me to do something, all you have to do is tell me it cannot be done. And all this time, I thought that was some sort of flaw in my character. But after hearing all these stories about my other grandma, I think maybe, just maybe, it might be biological. Until this experience, I never truly appreciated the idea of an identity crisis. But after talking to my sisters, I noticed that I started to have an identity crisis. It's because you go all of your life thinking you know who you are, you know why you are the way you are, you know where you come from, And then all of a sudden something like this happens, and it's like the light flashes in your eyes and you can't see. So after 2 years into reunion, here's what I think I have figured out so far. Your history is just the story that you tell yourself to make the facts make sense. So when there's new facts, you kind of rewrite your history to make those make sense too. So an identity crisis is just in between the old history and the new history. So you just gotta wait it out until that new history settles in. So you're probably looking at this painting and thinking to yourself, Anna, you are never going to finish this painting if you keep painting over this stuff. You already painted. Why do you keep doing that? And the only honest answer I can give you is that I did not do a detailed drawing before I started this painting. So that means I have to paint it 5 or 6 times in order to get the values that I need to make this look right. So my shortcut was a long cut, and that's the truth of the matter. While I was doing my research to find my father, I happened to come across a cousin who is talented musically. So I'm going to play her song while I finish noodling around with this, and then I'll follow up with some last words.
Yep, I'm ready. When I was a little bitty girl just up off the floor, we used to go down to Grandma's house every month and or so. We'd have chicken pie, country ham, homemade butter on the bread. But the best darn thing about Grandma's house was a great big feather bed. It was 9 feet high, 6 feet wide, soft as a downy chick. It was made from the feathers of 4 11 geese, took a whole boat to both for the tick. It would hold 8 kids and 4 hound dogs and a piggy we stole from the shed. We didn't get much sleep, but we had a lot of fun on Grandma's feather bed. Well, I love my ma, I love my pa, I love Granny and Grandpa too. I've been fishing with my uncle, I wrestled with my cousin, I even kissed Aunt Lou. Ooh! But if I ever had to make a choice, I guess it ought to be said I'd trade them all, plus the boy down the road for Grandma's feather bed. It was 9 feet high, 6 feet wide, soft as a downy chick. It was made from the feathers of 4 11 geese, took a whole boat forth for the tick. It would hold 8 kids and 4 hound dogs and a piggy we stole from the shed. We didn't get much sleep, but we had a lot of fun on Grandma's feather bed. We didn't get much sleep, but we had a lot of fun on Grandma's feather bed.
If you're still with me, you have the patience of a saint. I will never know if this is the hand of the grandmother that brought me home from the hospital or the grandmother that I never got to meet. But either way, I'd be happy to think that this is her hand.